We are back with another episode of the Gold Standard here on Fox 19 Now with Charlie Goldsmith. I'm Joe Danneman. We're taping this Friday, the day after the Bengals beat the Baltimore Ravens on Thanksgiving night. Charlie is just back in town from covering the game in Baltimore. I want to start with this. What's your first big takeaway from the Bengals' somewhat surprising performance in getting an easy win in Baltimore?
It was just very wholesome. The line I kept going back to was, let's forget about the Bengals record for 24 hours, because we have the next 20 years to talk about missed opportunities in the Joe Burrow window if the Bengals don't, on a macro level, get things turned around. It was still one of the coolest things that Joe Burrow has ever done, right up there with, like transferring from Ohio State and taking over LSU, right up there with turning around the Bengals and the idea of the Bengals like he did in 2021. Just look at the facts. Look at how quickly he came back, the challenge he faced on the road in Baltimore, and then even though it wasn't his best game, the end result.
I want to jump down to a list of questions here I have on my computer, and since you brought it up, I'm going to ask this. Where do you think this ranks in regular season wins for Joe Burrow? Because there's the Chiefs game, right?
Yeah.
That clinched the division. That's a big one. There are plenty of other games where he's had unbelievable performances. This one felt different. This one felt emotional. Everybody who watched him around the turkey with all of his teammates, those guys are clowning around, and Joe Burrow is getting emotional talking about the people who helped him get back to this moment. How would you rank this as far as regular season wins for Joe Burrow?
Unbelievable question. My favorite of all time is a deep cut, 2023 over the San Francisco 49ers.
Oh, yeah.
But that's a game we'll talk about another day. I'd have that one. I'd have home over the Chiefs in 21 and 22 in the top 5. I'm struggling to place specifically any more superstar games. I mean, here's where this is right at. All right, in this next tier, you have yesterday, and you have the homecoming to New Orleans with the walk-off touchdown to Jamar. Those to me are on the same level of Joe Burrow legend, top 5 that we just saw.
What impressed you most from Joe Burrow's performance in Baltimore?
How it started shaky and how he just said, you know what, I'm just playing quarterback. The game to me changed on 2 plays. It changed on, I believe, a 3rd and 11, off schedule, off script, found Jamar, where Joe was trusting himself, where Joe was letting himself play, where Joe wasn't playing like a guy with any sort of special cleat or anything like that. He played like Week 13 Burrow. And then there was also a moon ball down the sideline to Jamar, a perfectly placed pass where it was like, now I'm going. Yeah. And once you felt that, just that feeling and that momentum and that energy, just feeling how powerful that was, I'll remember the Hudson touchdown and the Yoshivas touchdown forever as well. But just that feeling of that energy with that deep ball is something I'll always remember.
Yeah, especially considering in the first half, he missed a couple of throws to Jamar Chase he normally always hits. When he hit that pass to Jamar, it just kind of triggered feelings of everybody who watches this team every Sunday. Oh, Joe and Jamar are back. And it feels like the Bengals are somewhat back because of that. What surprised you most about his performance in Baltimore?
You know what it was? It was that they had him run a QB sneak, and it was successful. But just think about that, too. And I'll loop in the idea that I believe it was 32 passes in the first half. But just the sneak, just driving off the toe, which I guess you literally do, and throwing yourself into harm's way, training wheels were pretty much off. Throwing 32 passes in the first half, the training wheels were pretty much off. I'll say it again, and you mentioned it. Wasn't perfect, plenty of rust, plenty of missed opportunities, especially early in that game, and the red zone plan and execution needed to be better. But there were still so many moments where it was just Burrow operating at a super elite level.
I'll say what surprised me, and maybe I shouldn't have been surprised after Zach Taylor told us during our interview that his favorite thing to do in the world is watch Joe Burrow play football. But it surprised me that he threw it 32 times in the first half for a quarterback. We're all wondering, will he ease back? Will Joe Burrow hand the ball off more? Will he get rid of the ball? It looked like Joe Burrow right from the jump as far as the game plan and how they were going to attack Baltimore. Now, it makes me think of the debate that was so prevalent here in Cincinnati of why is Joe Burrow doing this for what feels like a lost season? Then you see him perform. Then you feel the feeling the team has and the feeling the fan base has after they get the win. And then you see the scene around the turkey. Okay, and we can laugh, right, about what that's like. But that just felt different. That felt like what Joe Burrow brings to this team. That it's not just a great quarterback. It's a confidence he gives it's a moment in time that he rallies the team around him, and he just kind of lifts everybody, whether it's their football ability or their spirit and their confidence. It kind of makes me laugh at anybody that thought Joe Burrow shouldn't play and shouldn't come back this season. Do you kind of have the same kind of feeling after watching him play?
Let's say the NFL changed their schedule and Thanksgiving was week 18. If it were just coming back for this game, he should have just come back for this game, because that's how special and incredible and memorable and meaningful the moment was. To be in that moment and to succeed and to have the highlights that he did and the unbelievable throws, not all of them, but certainly several, like, that's why you play sports.
Yeah.
Even more than the championships and the titles and the accolades. It's because it feels really cool to do something really cool on a big stage. And he just was almost lost and ingrained in that frame, in that moment, in that idea on Thursday night where the record didn't even really matter, the stakes didn't even really matter. He just got to be Joe Burrow on Thanksgiving in Baltimore. And that's just fun. That's why I, played a bunch of sports at a low level as a kid. That's why you did the same, because we're all chasing that feeling. Burrow got that feeling at the highest level.
The word I use all the time for Joe Burrow is presence, that his presence matters for this team. People will say, oh, Joe Burrow's coming back, he doesn't play defense. Well, I said, just watch what Joe Burrow's presence does for a young Bengals defense. Do you think that's real, that his presence helps empower a team to play better football?
I mean, I was more excited to show up to work on Thursday night because I knew Joe Burrow was playing. I've heard that line, like being excited to show up to work, a lot just around the NFL, around multiple different sports that I've covered. And you can feel it when guys aren't excited to show up to work, and that's usually when people need to get fired, because that is so powerful. You lose your job if you're not as excited to show up to work. And the Bengals did a solid job of that with Joe Flacco. He inspired enough belief. But just the excitement and the energy level, whether you were a hot dog vendor or a yards chain guy or a linebacker, to show up because Joe Burrow was playing that day, I think that's meaningful. That counts for something.
And the proof is in the wins and loss record. The Bengals have won their last 8 games going back to last season that Joe Burrow has started in. Okay, the other big story coming out of Baltimore was the way the defense played that night and has played now for 3 straight weeks. I called it functional defense against Pittsburgh and the Patriots, that they finally started looked like a functional defense. And then they have the performance they have against Baltimore. How would you describe the Bengals' defensive performance on Thanksgiving night in Baltimore?
I want to start here. There were mistakes, and also Lamar Jackson didn't play well at all. But you're seeing a maturation process, and you see the coaches believe that this defense is maturing. And I'm going to get lost in some weeds here, and I'm not trying to dive too deep into the X's and O's, but there are different simulated pressures and disguised looks and rotated coverages that the Bengals felt like they couldn't do for a chunk of the season because they were that young. They were too young. It's let's just call it what it is. It's like, the kid can't sit in the front seat until he's a certain size. You can't ride the roller coaster until you're this tall. Sorry, kids. You don't get to do this yet. And then really it feels like over the bye week, and Zach Taylor spoke about this today, they were like, we're going to start phasing that in. We might have to live with some mistakes. But on the whole, maybe it can buy us a few downs. And now you're seeing those moving pieces, those rotating gadgets, and working together enough, not always, and there were moments where it cost them, but working together on plays that resulted in drive-killing sacks, that resulted in an interception, that resulted in a fumble. Like, that kind of stuff elevates the Bengals defense from young and inexperienced to, all right, now you're in your teenage adolescent years and seeing what you can do.
Okay, so I don't watch the game, and I'll admit this, as analytically as you do, but from someone who was watching the game, and maybe even just the past couple of weeks, looping it all together, it feels like the Bengals are bringing more pressure, that they are blitzing more. Is that correct?
Yes, but also it's not just blitzing more, it's they're showing blitz more, and that's more important than anything. What's a perfect example? We all hate this. Like an older brother or a bully, it's like, I'm not touching you, and then they slap you in the face. Like, for that bit to work, you have to have a decent split of not touching you and slap. And you can't just start slapping. You can't just never slap. There has to be a balance there. There has to be disguise. There has to be, catching you off guard with that. And the best defenses keep you the most off guard. And as you can imagine with the brother of the bully, it takes some sort of finesse. To be able some showmanship, I think, is the perfect word. And the Bengals defense has more showmanship. Sometimes they're blitzing and the blitzers are doing better. And then sometimes they're dropping Chris Jenkins back into coverage. And if Demetrius Knight wasn't also there, Chris Jenkins would have had a pick on Thursday night. So it's a little bit of all that, some blitzing and then more pretending to blitz. It's complex, but it's starting to work together.
So Al Golden now was able to start flipping some pages
Yeah.
in the playbook and start to use some more of the stuff he wants to use, and we saw it pay off on Thursday night against the Baltimore Ravens. Two names I want to say, and you tell me if they popped as much as I thought they popped. And not just this game, but Myles Murphy now for a few games now in a row. Myles Murphy, Joseph Ossai. Should both of those guys be praised the way they are being praised after the way they played on Thursday night?
When you factor in that there have been some solid moments from them as a whole, I think you feel like you're in a nice place with your edge rotation, even without Trey Hendrickson. Not a good place, not a great place, but a nice place for two guys who are on an upward trajectory. And something I was thinking about today with those two guys, Osai's in year 5, but his first year was a lost year, missed the full season with injury. Murphy's at the back half of year 3. Trey Hendrickson was a bench guy until year 4. Sam Hubbard really started to come on in December of 2020, his 3rd year. Some edge rushers storm onto the scene and they're unbelievable right away. But there are just as many examples, see Hendrickson and Hubbard, the perfect edge duo for a team that made it to the Super Bowl, where that development, here's what I need to do, why I need to do it, and most importantly, the extra gear, being able to find that extra zip on your fastball when you need it and how and when to access that. That's almost a learned skill that I feel like you're starting to see reflected in these guys' play style, and they look like older, better players, and that's impressive.
Really interesting point you just made there, comparing Trey Hendrickson and his late bloomer development, now one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Are Myles Murphy and Joseph Ossai playing their way into the Bengals feeling confident they can be contributors next season, do you think?
Both at very different stages.
Yeah.
Murphy, if we would have been having this conversation 6 weeks ago, Murphy has his 5th-year option on his contract that's on the deals of first-round picks. The Bengals have to decide in April if they're going to pick that up. 6 weeks ago, you're saying, we have not seen anything that merits, maybe 7 or 8, picking up this option for however many tens of millions of dollars for the 2027 season that would be. So all of a sudden, Murphy would be in a contract year. What's his future? They're just telling him, we don't believe in you. Well, that's changed. And I feel like this momentum does a lot to solidifying Myles' long-term future on a decent price tag with the Bengals. Ossai is he's in a contract year, a much harder guy to invest in long-term because he's always had trouble staying healthy. He's had injury problems that still, for me, are reflective of long-term concern that would have me hesitate of giving him that, for example, deal they gave Sam Hubbard in 2021. But he's proving he's at the I'm here stage of his career.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for one question here on the Bengals defense, because as much as Bengals fans should be just celebrating, like you said, forget the record for a night, maybe for a weekend, and just enjoy what Joe Burrow did and how this team celebrated that win in Baltimore. But Bengals fans and fans of any team, they always think big picture. And I'm sure there were some Bengals fans saying, okay, yeah, the defense got 5 turnovers, but guess what? Isaiah likely should have scored. That was a pretty soft offensive pass interference on Zay Flowers, which would have been a touchdown pass. And Lamar Jackson, just for moments in time, just handed the ball to the Bengals. And now you're going to see a team here in the final 5 weeks who, if they keep winning games, Bengals fans might be nervous that the front office will say, oh, look, the band's back together, and we don't need any major changes because they went on another run at the end of the season, and we don't have to invest in change in the coaching staff, and we don't have to invest in free agency to bring in defensive players. Keep letting this team grow, keep the core together, and see them develop now in year 2 under Al Golden. What would you say to a Bengals fan who said this might be a scenario they don't want to see play out because they'll just, quote, run it back and not make the changes that Bengals fans, some, might want to see?
I go person by person and position by position.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the defense could allow 70 points a game down the stretch here, but I feel pretty good that Dax Hill and DJ Turner as your outside corners is a solid starting spot for 2026. We spoke about the edge rushers, Miles Murphy and Joseph Osai. Maybe less Osai because he's in a contract year, but Murphy especially, he's getting there. No matter what, B.J. Hill and T.J. Slayton and Chris Jenkins in his role are going to have roles next year. So there are guys who, regardless of what happens, they're going to be in that spot. There are guys who, regardless of what happens, they could keep allowing just 14 points, but I'm going to have a hard time buying Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight without competition as your linebackers.
Okay.
Because they just played an unbelievable game against the Ravens. The defense, but Baltimore still picked on Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight. Demetrius keeps getting quiet benched, and Barrett just keeps getting his. Teams keep running the same concepts again, and I could get into those specific concepts another day. But if I'm picking up on it, it's pretty obvious. The guys with the most to play for are the safeties. Geno Stone will be a free agent. I could see a strong finish making the Bengals more interested in bringing him back on a modest price like the one he's on, and then Jordan Battle's playing for a starting spot. So the changes I look at as the safeties, because some parts of this defense need to change anyway. Some parts of this defense are going to be the same anyway. I look at the safeties as the guys with the most on the line here.
So it's still evaluating individual players and not looking at it as a whole as they look towards 2026. Okay, let's go now to the Gold Rush. Rapid fire questions here from Charlie Goldsmith. And we're going to start with a game ball. Okay, I'm going to do one for a player and one for a coach. And my one caveat is you can't say Joe Burrow. Okay, so if the game ball is going to anybody not named Joe Burrow, who is your game ball from Thanksgiving night going to?
Can I give it to the offensive line?
Of course.
Is that allowed? Can they share it? Because I feel like very quietly the offensive line is steady, it's balanced, it's efficient, and they're not going out and overpowering you and carrying the teams to wins. But this is exactly the baseline that you want and feel like you need from a Joe Burrow-led offense. And I'll give one more quick shout out to the coaches made a solid decision to put in Dalton Risner over Jalen Rivers 2 weeks ago. I think Dalton's more than done his job. I was very skeptical of him when the Bengals signed him. He has really impressed me this season.
So Zach Taylor was calling plays on Thursday night. The Bengals offense scored more than 30 points. You could argue they should have scored more because of all the field goals they kicked. Al Golden's defense forced 5 turnovers. At least they finished with 5. I'm not sure if they forced all of them. Some of them were self-inflicted by Lamar Jackson. But game ball to a coach, who does your game ball go to after the win in Baltimore?
I'd give it to Al Golden for the disguises and stuff. We've already talked about that. Let's highlight defensive line coach Jerry Montgomery for a second. Because when we're talking about the pass rush and the pass rush games and different crazy X's and O's things that where guys crisscross and run around, and they're doing more of that. That's a part of this evolution and maturation that I'm discussing. Also, who in the entire building has had a tougher set of stuff handed on their plate than Jerry Montgomery, whose first-round pick didn't show up until the middle of training camp, and the whole Hendrickson saga that's been going on all year. And he had to teach Miles Murphy how to play with his hair on fire, and he had to get Osai to be consistent for the first time, and he had to find something out of Chris Jenkins, and he had McKinley Jackson requesting a trade, and you like where a lot of those guys are at, not Shamar, Hendrickson's hurt. But a lot of those guys are making the progress you want to see. I'd like to give them a highlight.
Okay, rapid fire continues now with questions on 2 players Bengals fans have a lot of questions about. Let's start with Trey Hendrickson. What's your take on what's going on with Trey?
Do you know who, and maybe not, maybe I'll ask you, the listener, do you know who Isaiah Foskey and Jordan Jefferson are? You know who these guys are.
Because I hang out with you.
They're on the Bengals, and they combined to play 1 snap yesterday. They were both on the active roster. What I'm saying is those guys are taking a spot, but aren't contributing. They're not playing. They're not contributing anything. You're telling me that Trey, for an injury that's not drastic enough to the point that it initially required an IR stint due to the initial damage that was suffered. You're telling me that Trey right now still can't give you 5 to 10 snaps a game? Because all you need to do to outdo the Foskey-Jefferson dynamic duo is 2 snaps, and you'd be more productive than both of them combined. Can Trey not give you 2 snaps right now? Can he not give you 5 snaps right now? Even if it's just a third. They have kept T. Higgins active in some games over the years just to run goal line plays. Can Trey not just get you a couple third downs?
Doesn't that put your antenna up?
Puts my antenna up.
Yeah, mine too. Jermaine Burton.
How do you get hurt during a walkthrough, man? It was a walkthrough, jog through week because it was a short week. What I think was most frustrating of it all was, this would be a great movie, the idea of Burton. The Bengals needed the idea of Jermaine Burton. How many times did you see Mitch Tinsley trying to do something to get down the sideline against a really sticky physical Ravens corner, because that's what they have and that's what they do, and you just needed something with a little more juice. Juice is the word. Burton has juice. He's just not reliable. And the idea of Burton, I almost understand still the idea of the pick. It's just the person and the lack of consistency has made it one of the worst picks in years by them.
All right, now the gold nugget, and I have 2 fun questions at the end before we say goodbye. But the gold nugget is your segment in the show where you get to talk about an interview or a nugget you've come up with during your reporting. What do you have for us this week?
I just want to make sure that I'd like for the whole nation I don't have that kind of platform. I'd like the whole nation to know just about the beautiful bromance between Joe Burrow and Tanner Hudson, who since the day Tanner Hudson walked in on the Bengals practice squad in November of 2022, Burrow's like, I like that guy. And Burrow has, through reps in practice and targets in practice and targets in games, whenever, when Hudson was a practice squad elevation against the Rams in 23, because Irv Smith was hurt. Burrow did everything he could to save Hudson's career because he believed in what he was potentially capable of. And then to see that culminate in that one-handed catch on a touchdown, what a beautiful end to that buddy comedy.
Some Bengals now karma for Tanner Hudson. He's been on twice this year, including the week of the Baltimore Ravens game. So any Bengals or any Bengals fans can start sending DMs to Bengals players saying, hey, man, you go on Bengals now, you score touchdowns that week. I'm just saying. Okay, let's finish off the show with this. You're headed to the winter meetings of Major League Baseball. You'll get a chance to talk with Terry Francona. What's the most important thing you want to talk to Terry Francona about here in the winter meetings? The Reds' style of play. Yeah. Because they're not going to get that superstar difference-making offensive / position player addition. What can you do to evolve and improve and build with a full year set up, with a coaching staff set up, knowing what you're working with? Do you run more? Do you try to hit more homers? Do you evolve the offensive style that you've tried to put into place that wasn't consistent enough in 2025? What ideas do you have to coach these guys in a slightly better way to get slightly more out of them? Okay, last question. We'll send you off with a fun one. Everybody saw on TV the entire team around the turkey. I've never seen an NFL team do that before, celebrating on Thanksgiving. I'm imagining some of that food made its way back to the locker room. I didn't see any of it. You didn't see any turkey legs. You didn't see any turkey bones. You didn't see anything inside the locker room. I saw the video clip, and I was just mostly in the press conference room as they walked back. But I saw the clip of Sed Johnson walking back with a turkey leg. I would have asked for some if there was food around in the locker room when I was there. I bet a part of this is that Baltimore is my least favorite visiting locker room in all of football. It's funny, I walked in yesterday, and they won, but I just associated that place with something terrible has just happened to the Bengals. like Logan Wilson is out trying to hurt people with hip drop tackles, and Joe Burrow just broke his wrist. That's the kind of stuff that always happens in that, you're reacting to that. None of that yesterday, unfortunately, no food either. Pretty amazing that one of the Bengals who was getting most of the TV time, at least some of the great shots at the end, was William Wagner, the Bengals long snapper, just kept getting his face in front of a television with a big turkey leg, which I found was really funny. Anything else you want to get in before we say goodbye on the Gold Standard? How was your Thanksgiving? My Thanksgiving was okay. So I ran the Thanksgiving Day 10K, and it just destroyed my body, right? I race not often, I run often, and so racing just destroyed it, and it ruined my day. My insides were all a mess. And that's not a great thing on Thanksgiving, right? I look forward to that meal every single year, and I just wasn't in the mood to eat. That's a terrible, terrible thing. So I've got to either train harder next year for the 10K.
Sounds like you got to work harder to me.
Got to work harder. Nobody cares. Work harder, Lamar Jackson. Or just not race. So I have one of two options to make sure I'm ready to eat when it's time to eat next.
Can I tell you what I ate yesterday?
Yeah.
So I got to the game. Usually I get to these primetime games around when I'm hungry because I know there's going to be food there. Got there around 4:30, went right to the buffet. Mm-hmm. Before the other Raiders were there, I got my first Thanksgiving dinner, which was turkey, stuffing, side of fruit.
Yes.
They had the glazed carrots. They had... All right, I'm going to get back to the lasagna. I went with that.
Whoa.
Then, lasagna was in round 2. I didn't go full pie dessert yet. To cap off the first meal I had, they had these like waffle cookies and then a cold brew because they have a cold brew machine there. Then around 7:30, 7:45 with a few of the writers, I get my second dinner, which is a smaller segment of turkey, the lasagna, and there was one other Thanksgiving part of maybe some like mashed potatoes that were involved in that as well. And then I went in for the cherry pie. One of the writers then got there just as I was bringing the cherry pie plate. And I was like, man, you're like 3 plates behind. Get with the times. Halftime, I did not go for the halftime grilled chicken, chicken wings, hummus, and veggies combo. I went with just a lighter snack and another cup of coffee. Post-game, I had a slice of pizza.
Okay, last story here before we say goodbye. So Tanner Hudson, who was on Bengals Now, we played a game of Thanksgiving fun facts and trivia. And one of the questions was, how many calories do you think the normal American consumes on Thanksgiving? The answer was between 3,000 and 4,500 calories, and Tanner Hudson guessed 10,000.
Maybe.
I think you went 10,000.
10,000, yeah. Just another Thursday for me.
Outstanding. The great Charlie Goldsmith on the Gold Standard. We do it every week. We talk Bengals and Reds, and we do it in less than 30 minutes to entertain you and inform you about your favorite teams.
And make you hungry.
And make you hungry. I'm ready to eat now. Everything feels good. So maybe I'll go to Charlie's Thanksgiving dinner tonight. Can I come?
You got plans is the real thing. I mean, you're invited, but you got
Can't
plans.
say no when you're on TV. We'll see you next week.